Welcome to Slammed, a Boston Celtics podcast covering the Celtics and the NBA at large. I'm Meghan Ottolini from WEI, joined by Esteban Bustillos and of GBH, of course, and Justin Turpin of WEI. Okay, right before we start recording, I just want to dive into this from the jump. Justin, you just went ice fishing. That's how you spent your NBA All-Star break.
Yep, that's exactly how I spent my NBA All-Star break. Just did some ice fishing with some buddies up in New Hampshire. It was awesome.
Okay, so did you have like one of those little huts that's set up on the ice?
No, we didn't do all that. We didn't do all the huts and stuff. We just had chairs around the hole. That's all we did.
And how long does an ice fishing adventure last for you and your friends?
We did it all day. We were out there all day long. It was freezing, especially because
I was
like
gonna
midway
say,
through, it started to actually snow. So it was
Mhm.
freezing, but it was so worth it. We caught a couple pickerel, nothing crazy, but it was still fun.
you actually caught stuff.
Yeah, we did. We caught 3 fish, yeah, which was way more than I thought we were gonna catch. I didn't think we were gonna catch anything, to be honest with you. I thought we were just
Did
gonna
you
be sitting
toss them
there.
back or did you make a
Oh,
meal
yeah,
out
no,
of
yeah.
them?
Oh, no. We toss them. Catch and release. Always catch and release.
Yeah. This is wonderful. I will say I am not much of a fisher. The last time I went was actually after game 7 of the 2013 NBA finals when the Spurs lost to the Heat, and my future brother-in-law, and one of my best friends from high school, we were just like, well, we're all sad, so we're just gonna go fishing at like 1:30 in the morning. So fishing has some mixed emotions for me.
It was sad night fishing.
Sad night fishing,
Okay.
but a good memory. Despite the circumstances, would not do ice fishing. I'm not built like that. I'm sorry, Turb. That sounds wonderful.
I
I
had so many
could not do
layers
it.
on. It was still cold because we were out there for so
Yeah.
long. For the first while, I was all right, and then it was like, wow, it's getting really cold because there was literally a snowstorm that came in like right in the middle of it. Just like
Yeah.
started like really coming down in snow. I was like, all right, this is awesome until it went away, and now you're wet, and then you're even more cold. So it was still fun though.
I know we
It
gotta get
just
into it, but do you
it
cut
just
the
makes me
ice?
think of like Fargo.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, yeah. We cut the ice. It was like 7 inches of ice too, so it was like tough to get in there. Like it was.
Jeez, oh
It,
whiz.
we did have like a little makeshift auger that we used. We didn't have one of those electric ones. There was some guy on the other side. You could hear it like kind of sound like a lawnmower, kind of like ripping through the ice. I was like, I might have to go ask him if we can use his because this little makeshift one's taking like 10 minutes to make a
Yeah,
singular hole, but it was worth it.
I like
And
it.
this is something you've done a lot.
No, that was my first time. I do a
Oh,
ton
okay.
of fishing, but that was my first time doing ice fishing. So going in, I didn't think we were going to catch anything. I thought we were just going to be sitting out in the cold and it was going to be a big waste of time. But we got 3 fish, so it worked out.
So when I think of fishing, I have also mixed memories, Esteban, because before my little brother was born, my family went to the Outer Banks in North Carolina every summer, and my dad would insist on taking me deep sea fishing, where you go out deep in the ocean on a big boat
Right.
and fish out there, and I got so seasick every time. I think I went like 3 or 4 years, and you have to wake up at the crack of dawn to go out, and it was
Yeah.
just awful. It was
I
like the worst. I'd always just end up, laying down on a bench with Gatorade or something on the deck. It was so bad.
That's a
So,
whole
I don't
different animal.
yeah,
That
I'd like to
deep
do,
sea
like,
fishing,
fly fishing,
it's
though.
that's fun. That it's difficult, but it's fun. But like deep sea fishing, I did it in the summer. Literally everybody on the boat was laying down or belly over the boat throwing up. It was crazy. I did it
Yeah.
in Punta Cana. I've never seen anything like it. I was like, I felt it for a little bit. I was like, oh, I'm gonna like throw up. I was like, it was totally different. It was interesting.
Yeah, for a long time, I was like, "I can't do boats," because I always just thought of getting that deep sea fishing sick. Turns out everybody gets sick deep sea fishing, so
I like it. I like it. Are any of the Celtics into fishing? Do we know that? It seems like Porzingis, that's something he would do.
I
yeah, I could see, who else would be, like, for some
Hauser.
reason, back in the day, I could see, like, Grant being a fisherman, but of
Oh yeah,
course,
that
now
makes
he's
sense. Yeah,
he's
right.
away, so we
I'm
don't
trying to
speak his
think back
name.
to like the bubble when they were all trying to catch fish on the dock and like they could
That's
barely handle them and they all were like flopping back in the water. But I don't
Yeah,
remember any Celtics particularly. Like I
I
remember
feel
Ben
like
Simmons like couldn't
Jalen
even.
yeah. Oh
Jalen would
yeah.
be, like, philosophically opposed to fishing.
I
I
see
could see
that.
him do it as like a meditative practice, actually.
Oh,
I could see
just
that.
throw it back.
Yeah.
Well, let's get to basketball because Celtics got back to basketball last night against the Bulls. Not a lot of takeaways for me from that game. I think what is more interesting is the media car wash that Jayson Tatum went through this week, basically on the back end of All-Star break after the All-Star game. He had this big interview that he had with Malika Andrews, and in it, he talked a lot about some lingering biases that he feels he might be suffering from in the 2022 finals, his performance there, and also some of the accomplishments that he had just in his young career up to 25 now. And so I want to start here because obviously a big part of this is this conversation as to whether Jayson Tatum can be the next face of the league after LeBron. That's something that's been out there a lot this week. Jayson Tatum's standings in the MVP race, and also whether, it's championship or bust for him this season, his 7th season in the NBA. I'll start with, do you guys feel like there is some kind of lingering bias towards Tatum because he hasn't been the greatest in some of these recent big spots, whether it's game 7 of the Eastern Conference Finals last year when he rolled his ankle early in the game and was injured and ended up, his team losing that game to the Heat, or whether, of course, it was that 2022 performance when he had a quasi collapse no-show in the finals against the Warriors.
Yeah. Is all this stemming? Correct me if I'm wrong. Is all this stemming from one of the shows at All Star? Was this where the sort of the latest discussion came up?
I think it really took off when Stephen A endorsed it. I think he put it on his like A list thing, and then people kind of started actually talking about it.
That makes sense. Always instigating something. It seems around those parts. I mean, we're gonna get into the sound, I know, later. But he did mention like it's kind of difficult to, at least in his eyes, to be judging him on stuff that happened last year, 2 years ago. I mean, if we're talking about right now, if we're talking about the MVP race, that part shouldn't be relevant. If we're talking about like whoever takes the face of the league next, I mean, you probably need to have a championship to do that first. And LeBron, Steph, KD, I would all say are sort of around that current face of the league, and now you have Giannis, Jokic. So I think if he wants to go up to that next level, I would say, yeah, to your question, it's championship or bust. It is difficult though when yeah, when you have that narrative, a narrative I don't necessarily agree with. I don't necessarily think like last year or even the year before was his fault, quote unquote. There was a lot that went into those 2 losses.
Definitely. I think the championship part is the most interesting to me because I know there's a lot of people who follow the Celtics, fans or media, who look at it and go, "Oh my God, you guys talk about being in the Eastern Conference Finals like it's something that you should hang banners about." That was always the knock before they got to the 2022 finals. Now it's you got to get back, get over that next hump, win a championship, because I think the expectations for this group are, it's not just one championship. You should have more than one with how much you're about to spend on Jayson and Jaylen and what you've put around them. I don't know if you guys agree. I think that that's what the expectations are. Start with one championship is kind of the feeling.
100%.
For Tatum individually, I went through and I'm not the first person who's done this exercise, but I do think it, in this era of the NBA, it's helpful. So you look at some of Tatum's peers in terms of guys who would be faces of the league after LeBron retires. Giannis, he got his first championship in year 7. He was 27 years old. He got his first MVP in his league year 6 when he's 26. Jokic, obviously, first championship in his 8th year in the league. He was also 27, his first MVP in league year 6. If you look back, what I think, especially for a certain kind of Celtics fan, like an older generation, what frustrates them with Tatum is trying to compare it to someone like Bird or Magic, who are winning championships in their first 2 years in the league and then back there all the time. I feel like that's not really comparable. I even look at, like, Jordan not winning until his 7th year
Yeah, he was
and
28.
being in his really, we're talking about this NBA prime. Again, Jordan's a different era, I believe, of the NBA, but this prime, I think for this modern era is really between 26 and 32. Like, that's when you should be getting the bulk of your work done, and that's what made Kobe so interesting, is that he had this very early era with Shaq where he has his championship first in year 4, and then his much later years where all of a sudden he has this Brady-like, Tom Brady-like burst
Right.
of his championships then. So and he didn't get an MVP, I think, until, league year 12. And so I look at Tatum and I go, he's in his window for sure right now. The Celtics overall are without a doubt in a window right now. Tatum's in his real window, and if anything, you could say, okay, league year 7, that's about where his contemporaries are. He's slightly ahead of schedule in terms of what his playing prime should be if he stays healthy. So maybe we can all like take a breath. He should get it this year. He should get his first championship. But for him individually, I think he's just about right on schedule.
Because he's 25, right?
He'll
Yeah.
be 26 next month.
Next month. Yeah. I think all these points you made are fair. And when you look at like championships, so much of it is context around now, like who your team is, how the rest of the league is. And we want to make simple narratives out of these complicated, structures that these players have to go through to get to this highest level of winning championships in the NBA. And I think that obviously a lot of this is centered around the MVP conversation. And that's right now. It's just, I think it's a difficult award to win when you have, especially this year, you have so many really talented players. I think he's currently 5th in the rankings. Do y'all feel like that's where Tatum should be, or should he be higher than that?
So first, I want to play 2 pieces of sound because the first one is Tatum essentially talking about his MVP position and maybe what he's getting criticized for, which we talked about a lot, is the 2022 finals bias. And then last night after the victory over the Bulls in Chicago, he was asked about that again, and he kind of clarified where he's coming from.
Yeah, because I've felt that why hasn't he won? His window has closed, and it's tough when you have success early, right? Because I've been to the finals once, I've been in the conference finals 4 times, so it just seems like he should have done this, done that, and I was just doing those things at a really young age.
Yeah.
Now I've had some really good teams, and I've been a part of some really special runs, but I truly do believe my time is coming, and it's going to be well worth it. Yeah, because I've felt that why hasn't he won? His window has closed, and it's tough when you have success early, right? Because I've been to the finals once, I've been in the conference finals 4 times, so it just seems like he should have done this, done that, and I was just doing those things at a really young age.
Yeah.
Now I've had some really good teams, and I've been a part of some really special runs. But I truly do believe my time is coming, and it's going to be well worth it.
So, look, I just don't think that it's Tatum's year for MVP, and I think that's okay. Again, it's unusual because if you look through the faces of the league, I keep putting this in quotations because that's what people are using the phrase of. But when you look through these stars, a lot of them win the MVP before they win the championship, but that's not the way it has to go. And I think Tatum will be penalized in this competition for 3 things. 2 of them are related, which one of them is, okay, his stats are going to be lower than somebody like SGA. His stats are going to be lower than a lot of guys who are up there, with the exception of if Kawhi gets back into that top 5 when we're talking about the MVP ladder. And the other thing is just he's part of the best starting 5 in the entire league. And, I don't think he's complaining about that. The final thing is, and we talked about this a couple weeks ago, is like the guys who are in contention for MVP are putting up the most ridiculous single game stats where you have games in the 60s in terms of points. You have a 70-point game. I don't see that for Tatum this year. We've seen him put up 50 plus multiple times, even in the playoffs. I don't think that should really matter to him. I think it's interesting when he talks about MVP doesn't consider like the idea of the sacrifice that some of these players have to do. He's taking on a different role this year. He's definitely picking his spots. You saw it even last night in the third quarter. He explodes all of a sudden with 15 points at one point in there. Um, so it's all to say, I just don't think it's this year. It's this year for him. And I think that's okay. Like, this is the role that he's supposed to play on, hopefully, a championship team.
Yeah. To that point, how do you think of the MVP? Because I know there's a debate of rather if it should be the best player or the player who does the most for their team. So how do y'all think of it?
I look at it as like if it's the best player on the best team should be getting more consideration. But the thing is, like these voters all have different opinions, and that's why there's always going to be different votes. That's why you never really see unanimous MVPs. And when you look at it, like yes, his stats are down, but they're not necessarily down. Like they're nothing crazy, like less than anyone else. Like 27, 8, and 4 is still pretty good, especially when you consider, what he's working with and the talent, like that sacrifice. These guys aren't robots. Like I think they take into account like this is a loaded team and Tatum has to kind of take a lesser role, and he's done that, and he's doing a great job as a leader as well. So the way I look at it is like there's never going to be clarity. Like that's the thing, is because all these different people have different perspectives. So that's going to always be the tricky part. But I do think, in my opinion, the best player on the best team should warrant more consideration.
Yeah, Megan, how do you sort of think of the calculus of how you consider MVP?
So I think it should be a season award. And I think that's part of when you listen to Tatum, what his issue is that he feels like he's being penalized for something from 2 years ago. I don't really feel that way. Again, I think he's just addressing something that got him pissed off that he saw on TV. Kind of surprised he even saw it. I guess, it was over All-Star break, so he has some extra time. I I think, like, the thing that bothers me more than anything with the MVP race is the idea of voter fatigue, and we need to show some variation year to year. Like, I'm sorry, it's such crap that Jokic didn't win it last year when he was so clearly the best player
Yeah,
in the entire league, to the point where, it's in the finals and you're going, like, nobody does what this guy does, and that's not to knock Embiid, but it feels like what Embiid did last year was the opposite of what Tatum is doing this year in terms of trying to just have an MVP season. I'm not saying that's all he was doing, but it felt like even in the moment, not just in hindsight, that was what his goal was, the primary goal last season. And also that, of course, that helps his team win a lot of games. Best
yeah,
player on the best team, I don't think it should be any single criteria. If it's best player on the best team, then of course it's Tatum. And then we should be sitting here at the end of the regular season with 2 weeks left, and Tatum should be far and away the way that the Celtics are far and away in terms of above other teams in the league. I think there's a good argument for what SGA is doing, and
yeah,
just having that consistent performance night in and night out, and how he's really changing the conversation around that team if you're somebody who follows the league overall. There's all these different considerations. I still don't think that, like, any one thing, just because Tatum's best guy on the best team, is that enough for him to be crowned MVP this year? No,
yeah.
because, like, and I always say it like this, if Tatum, heaven forbid, went down, do the Celtics still win a round?
Are you saying do they, or are you saying they
Do
will?
they? Yeah.
Oh, I think they can win a round.
Yeah,
That's
I
yeah,
think so
I can see
too.
that.
So, like, if you go through the whole exercise, if SGA goes down, does OKC win a round? Probably not.
Right,
If Jokic goes down, does Denver win a round? Probably not.
Right.
Like, this is kinda what I think about when I think about what your value to your team is. It's not to take away from Tatum, it's just there's so much around him. It's such a powerhouse starting 5. It's not just about narratives. I just don't think it's the year.
Yeah, it's interesting. This kind of feels like it feels similar to the WNBA All-Star vote last year, where you had 3 major stars with Asia Wilson, you had Breanna Stewart and Alyssa Thomas, and they all had very the interesting, unique cases why they should be MVPs. I think you could do similar for pretty much anybody in this race right now. Everybody has a unique case. And I think you just kind of have to parse it out. I sort of lean towards SGA, maybe even Luca, just based on like everything they're doing for their teams and making them contenders. But that's just really going to vary on who you are.
Yeah, and I don't think the best player on the best team is an end all be all, but I do think like his stats are like still pretty good. Like there's nothing to scoff at there, and I think like that does just warrant a little bit more consideration. And looking forward, if Tatum is gonna like make this MVP push right now, like the momentum's hot. Like if he wants to continue it, now's the time to do it. When they're about to go on a streak of 7 consecutive national TV games, 8 of their next 10, like he's gonna have the national spotlight to really push this agenda when people are really starting to buy into it. So if he's going to kind of close the gap and make things a little bit more interesting, this is the time to do it. And last night I thought like he was good in the third quarter, but like if he plays like he did in the first half over these games, it's just going to plummet.
All right, should we move on to Take Flight and do all of our all-star talk there?
Yeah, let's do it. Let's do it.
All right, Take Flight. So this is the section of the podcast when we go around the league or just some quick hits with the Celtics themselves. But obviously, the Celtics had a really prime position in All-Star Weekend, starting with Jaylen Brown and the dunk contest. Quick takeaways from you guys. Did Jaylen Brown do more to help or hurt the cause of bringing more stars into the dunk contest? Because this has been a very divisive issue. It's been maybe more negative feedback than you think somebody like Jaylen Brown would get in the dunk contest.
I actually thought he did pretty good. I mean, I know there was a lot of Twitter pushback, uh, but the dunks he was doing were not easy. Part of it may be like something like when he did the whole Terrence Clark tribute on the video floor, I guess. That was really cool, but people outside of Boston may not understand the significance of that moment. But even outside of that, I thought the dunks were athletic. He wasn't doing just easy stuff. When you saw it on replay, it was like, oh, actually, this was pretty good. So I thought it was actually I thought it was a good effort. But Mac McClung, I agree with him winning overall. I think the one he did where he let go of the ball and then got it again, that was cool. So you have to give him props for that.
I thought it was cool too. I thought he had some cool dunks and he walked away healthy, which is obviously the most important thing. But like, I love how he used the kind of the dunk contest as like a vehicle to really like kind of show his creativity. Like Jaylen really takes pride in like being a creative guy and doing all that, like with the left-handed dunk, the Terrence Clark, like that stuff was really cool to me. I did think some of the scores were a little bit higher than maybe they should have been. And I think maybe that might have been a little star power favoritism there where they're kind of throwing him a bone, being like, all right, you're helping us out participating. We're going to help you out by giving you a couple extra points. But I thought it was cool. I thought some of them were a little bit overjudged, but I thought he did a good job.
To be honest, like it was kind of underwhelming to me in the moment. I think a lot of the meaning, as you said, Esteban, like behind the dunks, got lost on some of the audience in the crowd, and I think it's about putting on a show. I always think of Blake Griffin with the Kia and the
Yeah.
choir and all that. And it's like, it doesn't have to be a serious thing. I thought it was great when Mac McClung brought out Shaq to dunk over Shaq. I'm like, that's it. Like that's the headline. You dunked over Shaq. That when you can explain the
Yeah.
dunk in one sentence like that, I think that's really what carries a lot more weight than anything. So I give Jaylen like all the props in the world for doing it. I give him props for his media availability yesterday when somebody asked him about it. And he's like, yeah, if no other stars do it again next year, like F it, I'll do it again. Like, I love that he's making it something of why are other guys in the league afraid of it? I like that attitude from Jaylen a lot. I just maybe bring a little bit more of something into it because what is this streamer guy, Justin? Like, does this guy mean anything to you? The guy sitting in
I
the chair is like a YouTuber streaming it, Kai Sinet or whatever his
I
name
had
is.
never heard of him until I saw
Okay,
that.
that
I've
makes me
never
feel
heard of him.
better.
Yeah, never heard.
Same.
Because I'm like, is this cool? Are people watching this on YouTube? As he probably like that, those guys make a ton of money, but
But
I'm
I
like,
did see something that he's like right around 5 feet, so nobody was really like impressed with it because of how short he is.
yeah, I saw a lot of people being like, okay, so Jaylen Brown dunked over a child, which was my original idea, was Jaylen Brown dunking over
Yeah.
Deuce. I don't even think Deuce was there.
That would have
Was
been better.
But was that dunk when the guy was sitting? Was he further out than like the guys who when they were standing? It looked like he may have been a little further out, or was that just my perception?
He might have been. I don't remember. I don't remember how
Yeah,
far he was, to be honest.
yeah, that's fair. I will say, I know we were all very grumbly about the video floor last week. That was probably the best use of it was
It
during the
looked
dunk contest.
cool.
It looked cool when you know Terrence Clark thing, and then Jaime
Yeah.
Jaquez had the Mexican flag over, and top 5 Mexicans all time just based off of that alone. So that part was cool. But the rest of like the video floor thing was kind of weird. Like when they were doing the 3-point shootout, I don't know
Oh,
how
see,
they
I
I don't know how
actually
they saw.
liked it. I like
You like
Stan corrected. I thought, granted I was watching it at a birthday party at a bar, but like
yeah.
I thought it looked pretty cool during the 3-point contest. I was like, this is looking better than I expected it to. They were lighting it up all these neon colors and everything.
Yeah.
Not always the easiest to see what's happening, but I thought for effect, maybe they don't need it. They just like flash it at different times, you know?
I just don't know how you shoot with the light shooting up in your eyes like that.
Yeah.
I wonder if that impacted other people's performance. I know we want to get into the game itself. How did y'all? Besides the dunk contest, what did y'all like? I really liked. I thought the best event of the whole weekend was Steph versus Sabrina.
Yeah, that
That
was
one was
cool.
just a lot of fun. And like they each had more points more made baskets than than Dame, who won.
Yeah.
I think Sabrina tied it, but both had at least 26. That was wonderful. I was that do that again.
Yeah, do more. See, that's the thing is, I think if you can do some different stuff, be more creative
Yeah,
than just, hey, we're rolling out these stars who are kind of giving some effort, no effort in the All-Star game. Here's my question for you guys, because we're all slightly different ages. Like, people were absolutely losing their minds over the embarrassing lack of effort, and it's like almost a 400-point game, the All-Star game itself. My entire life, all I remember is people talking about how goofy the All-Star game is and how stupid and meaningless it is, to the point where I was going back and I was watching mid-90s highlights of All-Star games to go, "Am I misremembering this?" And I think it's all relative. It's certainly
yeah,
slower paced than ever before. There's never been defense in it. Even in people say, "Oh, in the first quarters in the '90s, guys would actually go hard." Come on. It's the
yeah,
All-Star game, and I don't know how you fix it. Maybe you put different parameters on it for your scoring to this point. Maybe you just do the Pro Bowl thing that the NFL has done where you scrap the game altogether because guys just aren't gonna try. But
right.
this whole conversation around that it's an utter embarrassment to basketball, it was gross, it was lame, but to me, it's almost always been that way as I can remember. What about you guys?
I don't necessarily remember it being ultra competitive per se. But you go and there is like there is certain lore around it where it's like, oh, when Michael Jordan like went off in one of his first All-Star games, that's still a big moment. Um, And I mean, it has been, even though like historically not competitive all the way through. I think the last few years where they instituted the Elam ending, where it's a target score that worked, and I'm not sure why they went away from it here. Because I think it's kind of clear now. With the way how the league is and how players are, if you just try to make it a regular game, like it just won't work. you have to put some sort of incentive, you have to sort of institute competitiveness in the game. So I think one of the simple solutions here is just put back the Elam ending. That makes the most sense to me.
How about this? If you want to completely modify the game, kind of like the NFL did with kind of going the flag football route, what if they made it like a big three type of thing, like a 3-on-3
Ooh,
tournament?
yeah.
You
Interesting.
pool all that money, right? Because they all get 100,000, I believe, the winning team. You pool
Mhm.
all that money together, and then that goes to the winning team. So there's more incentive money wise, and then also it's like that's gonna bring like people. That's gonna bring out the competitive spirit. Like you look at the in-season tournament, like people were inherently like competitive with that because there was something to prove, there was something to play. And like if you don't, like, I know these picking the starters is kind of a production, so if you don't want to go away from that, you still pick the starters, but those are the captains, so those guys then draft the reserves. So if you have to expand the pool of all-stars, you do it, but you'll still have your all-star starters because that's an honor, that's a production on TNT. The league makes a big deal out of it, and then you kind of make it a little bit more competitive. And I think fans will eat that up.
So it would be like 10 teams of 3 on like on what? And I guess you could split it between 2 days.
Yeah.
That could make sense.
Yeah.
That
10
could make
and
sense.
go to like 11, like nothing crazy, but like just gives some competitive nature. Like, I don't know how many people watch the new Pro Bowl this year, but I mean,
Yeah.
just a thought.
I think that sounds a little bit more like of what the NHL did, right?
Yes.
They go
Yeah.
to 3-on-3 format, and we're struggling with something similar. At the end of the day, it's an exhibition match, and so to pretend like it's something else, the other thing I would say is it's not really for us. It's
Yeah.
for it's a
An honor.
honorary weekend
Yeah.
for players, and it's also, it's for little kids. Like, a lot of it is for little kids who are into basketball, and so I gotta say, at some point, a 60-year-old man who has been following the league for 50 years, it may not be for that person.
It the nuclear option I thought about if you're Adam Silver, and I don't necessarily agree with this, but do you make it, if you want to be about competitiveness, say whichever conference wins gets home court advantage in the finals. That team, no matter what team it is, that conference gets the home court advantage.
This is the kind of ideas that I love because it's the same thing with the in-season tournament. If you want this to have actual bearing, the only thing that you can do is either offer a lot of money, and it would have to be a lot of money for what your all-stars already make, especially with the number of supermax contract guys that routinely make it, or it has some bearing on the playoffs, which is the real thing, the real season that matters to these guys. I think that there would be a total cluster F, like just a storm of controversy, but maybe that's something
Yeah.
good. Like, maybe that's what the league needs, a little shakeup. Forget
It,
changing the 3-point line or taking away corner
yeah.
threes or something. We all of a sudden have some implication with the playoffs from All-Star weekend.
I think he could like just float it out there as a warning. He's like, listen, you do it the right way, or we're gonna do it my way, and we'll see which way you like better. Honestly, that sounds more like a David Stern sort of Iron Fist move, but who knows?
Absolutely, and you'll do it with your shirts tucked in. Let's move on because Terp, you wrote a great article for weei.com this week. It was about 25 numbers that tell the story of the Celtics season so far. You're the stat master, so you threw out a ton of stats about illustrating how good the Celtics have been for this first part of the season. I have to say, my favorite stat here, because it's just like so simple to illustrate who the Celtics have been. You had in here a 99.9% chance for the Celtics to finish first in the East, which I like because it feels like there's some kind of company behind this stat that's saying legally you can't say there's a 100% chance. You can only say 99.9, and we will not be held liable for this. Uh, I the East is just not threatening to me with the Celtics, and it's not about seeding. Like, I think they're gonna be first in the East, but other than the Heat, which I think the Celtics have some kind of, like, I don't know, they have a voodoo doll of Jayson Tatum and Jaylen Brown or something. that Pat Riley is messing with. Like, other than that, we'll see with the Knicks this weekend. Terp, you're gonna be there in New York in person. I can't wait to hear your account of it. I all my, boogeymen for the Celtics live in the West. I'll put it that way.
Yeah, they're 31-6 against Eastern Conference opponents. 31-6. Like, that's incredible. And one of those losses came against Charlotte, and that was the overtime loss, which also happens to be their only loss against a sub 500 team. It's like when I was looking through it, I was like, wow, like I knew they were really good, but I didn't notice like just how good they were, especially in the Eastern Conference. Like, yeah, 7 games is a lot, but like they are really head and shoulders above the Eastern Conference. And I don't think anyone really saw it coming that way. Like Milwaukee was a team that people kind of feared once they got Dame, and it just hasn't been that way. And I'm with you 100%. Like all their boogeymen are in the West, and that's why this stretch of upcoming games is going to be so crucial.
Yeah, was that the number that impressed you the most? Turp, was their record against the East?
I think so. Yeah, because like I know they only have 12 losses, so like I knew a
Right.
handful were on the West, and a lot of them were on the road at the beginning of the year, but they've only lost 3 at home. But like I thought their record against the East really impressed me because like that's impressive. Like the East is like 2 through 7's really close, and then Cleveland's obviously kind of climbing their way up. So that was the number that probably impressed me the most. Yeah.
Yeah, I think for me, reading through that, which again it was very well done, very well researched. I think it was at the time because this was pre AllStar, plus 556 point differential, which is probably higher now after last night. Largest in the NBA at the time. Next highest team was the Timberwolves, plus 399. That's nuts. That's nuts to be that far away from the second closest or from the closest team with that just large of a margin of point differential. I think that was the most eye-popping thing that came out to me. Just like, wow, this team not only can score and you will stop you from scoring. Yeah, that was I think that is very foretelling of what they can do down the stretch.
And to give context, as we've talked about before, that stat is happening in a league where offense may be more high powered than ever before. I mean, we
Yeah.
are like in the offensive glory days of the NBA. So check that out. If you haven't, go to weei.com. Check out Justin Turpin's 25 numbers well, wait, let me get this exactly right for you, Turp. 25 numbers that tell the story of the Celtics season so far because it's really great.
That's it. Yep.
And there's a lot more stats to crunch. But Turp, as I just said, you're going to be at Madison Square Garden on Saturday to see the Celtics and the Knicks. So a game that we have been looking forward to. Along with that, of these upcoming games, and Turp, again, feet on the street. You've been doing the work this week, but you had a great tweet about how often the Celtics are going to be in prime time coming up, which we're all looking forward to. But of these matchups, which games are you most looking forward to for the Celtics to kind of get an indication of who they are? We've got Nuggets on March 7th. They host OKC in April. They're at the Cavs in March. They host the Knicks in April on my birthday, actually. Might need to check that out. They play the Suns twice and they play the Bucks twice, a home and away. Out of those games, what are you guys looking at?
This is not something I think is something that can be quantified per se. And we sort of mentioned it with this idea that the Celtics boogeymen are in the West. But just looking at throughout their losses, the teams that they have seem to struggle with the most are Western contenders. So I'm really interested in seeing, okay, so they have the rematch against the Nuggets. They're going to have OKC here. How do they deal with those teams? They lost to both of them. I think that's for me. Again, I don't think it's a storyline or a thread per se. Just something I've noticed that like those teams, for whatever reason, they just have had hard times with, and they're both very good. So I think that to me is going to be really interesting, and I think their games against the Cavs and the Knicks, just because those are the two teams right now I feel like are the most threatening to them in the East. Milwaukee, given all of the context, the discussion around Doc Rivers this week is in a weird place. So I think I would say, yeah, Nuggets and OKC. Those are the games that I was like, you circles like this could be a finals preview right here.
And I think one people might be overlooking is that one when the Warriors come to town on Sunday. I think it's March
Oh,
2nd.
yeah.
The Golden State Warriors come to town. And I know they're, I think, one game above 500. They've been struggling, but that's a team that beat you earlier in the year in December. And obviously, that's been your big brother. Like, that's a team you haven't been able to figure out since the 2022 finals. Even last year when they played at TD Garden, that went into overtime. And it's a game that really shouldn't have went into overtime. Steph Curry did his thing. They kind of turned it back, turned the tide. So I think that's another one. Really, that stretch of Golden State at home against Golden State, then to Cleveland, which is the 2 seed, then at Denver. That's a tough 3-game stretch. And I think that's going to tell a lot about this team.
Absolutely, especially because if you look at last year, you started to see a similar kind of fall off in February, and then the slide really came in March. That's when the wheels came off of what was looked like a bona fide championship contender at the beginning of last season. I think it's just got to be OKC for me. Like we talked about this weeks and weeks ago. What will it take for OKC to really have more of a national platform? Or more of a higher profile is maybe the better way to say that. And I'm excited to see SGA. Like I love a matchup that is two greats going up against each other that you don't get to see a lot. And so seeing Tatum and SGA kind of duke it out, to me, that's my number one. But,
Can
hey, we got spoils of riches coming up. It feels like the playoffs are 1,000 years away, but there's a lot of good stuff in between. And we will be
and
covering it all with you. Anything that you guys want to add, young Terp? I'm a little nervous about you going to Manhattan for your first time as
I'll be
a
behaving.
full-blown adult. I know you're working, but just, keep in mind just because the bars stay open until 4 a.m., you do not need to be there until 4 a.m., okay?
That's right. That's
Take it
right.
easy. Take it in stride. Remember, you'll be back. I promise.
I did want to add one thing. You mentioned the national spotlight for Oklahoma City. Can you believe that Boston OKC game is not nationally televised?
It's a travesty.
I mean, that's
Can we
insane.
flex this?
Wait, the upcoming one?
Yeah, the upcoming one. Well, they just flexed the Cleveland one, so they can flex it. I would have to think that one gets flexed, right? Like
We've
that's a
already had
finals
this
preview.
discussion before. This is
Like,
crazy.
how is that not
Because
nationally
OKC just
televised?
isn't in prime time.
They have to be after this year. I think like we'll see a lot of changes in that, but like that's crazy. They haven't flexed that yet because like since December, like we've been talking that this is a potential finals preview, and it still hasn't been flexed. But they flexed the Cleveland one, so I guess we'll see.
There are two pet causes for the Slam podcast. It is respect for Derek White's name and get OKC into prime time.
Yes,
I don't know
yes.
why OKC is a pet project of a Celtics podcast, but that's where we are.
I like it. Last thing I'll add, I have to say, maybe my favorite thing from this week was bored Jayson Tatum on Twitter. He's had a couple of great tweets where he like retweeted Ronaldinho in his jersey. Y'all see this on Survivor Turkey?
No.
Apparently, Ronaldinho, the soccer legend, made an appearance and he was in a full Jayson Tatum uniform, which was weird. But then my favorite one, just a few days ago, Spurs Muse tweeted out list of players with 15 plus All Stars, 15 plus All NBA appearances, and 15 All Defensive teams. One person, Tim Duncan. Tatum retweets it just with the caption, him Duncan. So my two universes crossing over there. It was shout out Jayson Tatum. Who knew? A huge Tim Duncan fan.
Well, he gets the comparisons a lot, right? With the way that the way that he carries himself, I should
Yeah,
say.
that makes
His
sense. That
leadership
makes sense.
style. His
Yeah,
leadership
very
style is
laid
Tim
back.
Duncan-esque. That's
Yeah.
what when people ask, can Tatum be a leader? Look at Tim Duncan. That's a whole other conversation. I'm sure we'll have it on this podcast. So keep on listening. Wherever you found us today, you can continue to find us, but YouTube, Odyssey app, Spotify, follow us on Twitter. We're not on the Instagram, but we will be on the Instagram, like the old Facebook, at some point. I promise. All right. Thanks, guys.